So the title today is Remember Kindness. If you're to remember anything, it'd be very good to remember kindness. In Hebrews we use the word chesed, loving kindness on people, but remember kindness and it will remember you. It's very important to get this message across today and in this time and in this season. But charity and almsgiving is one of the most significant focuses for people during this season of remembrance throughout the world. You have the holiday of Hanukkah, the holiday of Christmas, the holidays for both Jews and Christians, and for non-believers alike. Most people these days are focused on giving to one another and giving to those that are in need. But for us as Jewish and Messianic believers, we have spent this season reflecting upon the miracles of God within our families and community by lighting the menorah and telling the stories of our ancestors struggling to maintain their calling and struggling to actively participate in worshiping God consistently throughout their history. The children of Israel did not consistently worship God in the manner of true faith. They would remember God, and in their time of remembrance, they would be blessed by Him, and they would be cared for by Him. And we take the example of the time of the wilderness. Do not forget the experience of the wilderness, the Lord says to the children of Israel, because when you forget and you go into the galut and you go into exile, you'll realize a better life, a life of material blessing, and a life of a season of great joy for your flesh but your spirit. While your flesh is building, your spirit is dying because you forget God. And He says, "Do not forget me and do not reject me, because if you forget my commands, then I will forget you." And here during this time of lighting the menorah, we remember the things that God did for our ancestors, what He did for our people Israel. We talk about the story of the passing of Jacob's life. Jacob in this parashah, he dies, and we'll talk here at the end of the teaching about the request that Jacob has upon Joseph. The request that Jacob had requires a great kindness, a kindness beyond what anyone could ever understand. And we'll talk about and understand it a little bit, but to give you a preview, the one kindness that the sages believe is the only true kindness, is a kindness done to the dead. Because you do that kindness without requiring something in return. You're kind to the dead without requiring them to repay you. So we'll talk about that here, toward the end of the teaching. But at the end of Jacob's life, he requests of his son to take him and bury him in Israel. The other thing that you need to recognize is that the children of Israel, as Joseph was dying, next parashah, next week, we'll see that Joseph is passing. He lived 110 years. Interestingly, he was the youngest of, he lived the shortest of all of the brothers. He died before all of the brothers. He probably had the most difficult life of all of the brothers, in that he was very stressed. I mean, he was the leader of a great world power. And, that stress probably took a toll on his life. And when he died, there just was a short period of time that the Egyptians, specifically the Pharaoh, forgot about Joseph. He did not remember him. If the stories do not continue, if we do not continue to share the changes and the great things that occurred in the past that really define us in the present and project us into the future, then we'll lose sight of exactly what, who, and where we are. The children of Israel have spent their entire every generation, they've spent remembering what has happened and occurred in the past and teaching it to their children and their children's children so that it might still be a light to them in the future. Just as the menorah was lit. See, we had a very early Hanukkah which is supposed to not happen for another 1,000 years or something crazy, right? That's what they say. And it was very weird, to be honest, to have it that early, right? Thanksgiving, we're lighting Hanukkah menorah. But the point is that we still are in that season, and we're still within that period of time. My wife says, it stinks that everybody's ramping up and we're ramped down. I said, well, just let's keep the menorah lit, right, throughout the whole season, so that people remember, so that we remember. I mean, you can still light it. I mean, it's now your candelabra, right? You don't have to. You're just not writing the days. It's just your candelabra. So just to stay in the season and the festivities of it, and it's very important to maintain that. So this time does not only call to memory the destruction and rebuilding of the temple, because at the time of Hanukkah, this is what we remember, right? We remember the Maccabees, and we remember the temple was being violated by the pagans, and swine's flesh was being sacrificed on the altar, and all kinds of terrible things were happening. But it was, in essence, the temple was being destroyed. And we reflect on the rebuilding of that temple. And I mentioned later on, it's coming to mind now, so I'll say it. Every temple must be destroyed and rebuilt. There's something significant in the fact that the temple of God is destroyed and rebuilt. Even Yeshua said this temple must be taken down so that it can rise again. Meaning his body, even you, must be broken down. You are the temple of God. You must be destroyed to be rebuilt. And when you're rebuilt stronger, right? Spiritually, I'm talking, right? You've got to take it and put it into a spiritual mindset. This season and this time is about the destruction of even ourselves, destroying who we were and rebuilding what God requires us to be. And so here we reflect upon that time, upon that memory. And we also reflect on the struggle that Jewish people have had throughout the Galut, throughout all of the exile. They struggled to maintain solidarity in their Jewish identity. Whether or not they wanted to maintain being Jewish. Should we be Jewish or not, right? The rest of the world persecutes us if they know that we're Jewish, so why stay that way? So they struggled very much with their Jewish identity. They struggled very much to worship the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac and Jacob. And they struggled to practice a faith that our sages and forefathers received from firsthand experiences with the divine presence. The belief that our forefathers and the sages that preceded us literally experienced God and the divine presence on their own, and then passed that experience down to their children. Do you believe it or do you not believe it? If you're sitting in the room, I assume you believe that that was a true experience. We assume that you believe that what they experienced and they passed down through the writings and through the Proverbs and through the Torah and the lessons of the Scriptures, that's very real to you, as it's very real to me. So we use this time to reflect upon this struggle, the turmoil that our people have had throughout all of history. We also use this time to reflect upon the many occasions that the people of God were persecuted as a result of the faith that they did harbor, murdered by evil men that have risen from the ashes of a world ablaze with sin and darkness. It's important for us as believers to reflect upon the many persecutions that our brothers and sisters in Mashiach throughout the world experience daily. It's interesting that despite having all access to the teachings of Yeshua through the letters of the apostles and the Gospels, historically, some Christians have found themselves culpable for bringing about persecution, for bringing about destruction and even death to the people groups across the globe for their lack of faith in Yeshua and the God of Abraham. Can you imagine, because someone doesn't believe in Yeshua as the Messiah, that you yourself take it into your own hands to slay that person? Does that even register to you? When you read the scriptures about love and caring and the relationship and the battle of being in the spirit versus the flesh, and then you come into this world around us and you point to somebody who doesn't believe exactly like you, and you think to yourself, if you don't convert, if you don't change, you have to die. Does that even make sense or register in your mind? Well, it shouldn't. I mean, I think we've advanced in society far enough that shouldn't come to term. We shouldn't even entertain that kind of thought. But throughout history, that was the idea. The idea is that as we expand, as we grow, and as we conquer lands, if people don't convert to believing that Christianity is the only true way, then you must kill them because they're a threat to our order of life and the way we live. And many Jewish people and others around the globe were murdered as a result of that very same belief. The reputation of some has tainted the ability of others to perform righteously in the eyes of the world. I'm not saying that all Christians should be held accountable for the deaths of the past. In fact, Jewish people and Christians today, in many ways, are still trying to repair them and mend the breach between what has just happened in a short period of time. Just think about it. In the 1940s, people were being killed. And they were being killed under the banner of a tyrannical government. But at the same time, next to that banner was the banner of the Catholic Church. Not very far away, there's people that are alive to this day that still remember this, right? That they were there, that were involved, that were a part of it. So should everyone in the future now be responsible for that problem? I don't think so, and I think that we've advanced in society far enough to know that you don't place blame of one single man's actions upon an entire people group. But that reputation of some has tainted the ability for others to perform righteously. So what I mean to say is that the actions of a few have defined the reputation of many. To make the point, Christians are to this day still trying to mend those fences because of one specific incident. We can talk about the Holocaust. I'm sure that not one believer today was responsible for those actions. But the reparations must be paid as a result, and in the minds of some, the future generations are culpable, thus they must pay for the evils of those that preceded them. The point I'm trying or attempting to make is that the world is watching you, and more importantly, God is watching you. And what you do will reflect upon the many generations of believers that come after you. Our lives speak loudly into the future, even if we don't realize that we're building the future. Many temples are destroyed today, and many of us are rebuilding those temples. We don't realize that we're rebuilding anything, but we are in fact mending and building walls and repairing breaches in walls. And people are watching us do so. They watch how we act, they watch how we interact, they listen to our approach, and your life is under a microscope. But our lives speak loudly into these future generations. And the reality is that our present was not built by the people of today, but rather those that preceded us in thought and in circumstance. We're not building our own today. Today was built before it even came. Somebody prior to us was building the roadway to where we are today. Without having the building blocks set for us, we wouldn't be able to project where we're at now. So today, we're literally we're not taking care of now, we're taking care of tomorrow. And people don't realize that we're building the future. God even says this to Abraham. He says, I'm calling you out. I need to take you to a land that I will show you. And he says, I will make you the father of many nations. And your seed will be as the sands on the seashore and the stars in the sky. But that man, Abraham, the perfect man, never saw what he built. He was building for the future, not for that day. He was not going to see his sons be as the sea of the sands and the seashore. He's not going to see his sons as the stars in the sky. He simply was doing a charge to create the stage to build for what God saw in the future. He was a builder, and God was the architect. God knows what he's doing, and he knows where to place people. The problem is that we don't know. We don't realize that it's not for now, it's for tomorrow. And so what we're doing, our actions, everything that we do, is hopefully preparing people in the future to become exactly who they should be. 50 years from now, 100 years from now, when Rosh Hashanah is still standing, they'll reflect upon, the founding fathers of Rosh Hashanah and the founding families, and they'll look back into the pictures and the photos, and this place will still be alive and well and probably bursting from the seams because it will have been around for generations. And children will be born, and children's children will be born. And that's how things grow, right? I just look at my wife's background and where she came from. They started as a small cluster, and then it expanded, and there's like 30 different congregations now around the world. Just in generations and generations, that's the way things work. But you never know what you're doing today and how it's affecting the future course. We've learned and are now teaching what the next generation should do, and we have the ability to change the course of time just like the people of history have done. When Hitler was on his ascent to power, it was as if there was no one that could stop him. In fact, many seemingly loved him, except, of course, those that were victimized by his plans. But if it were not for the courage of men to destroy what he was propagating, then our world could quite possibly be void of you. It could be void of me. And it could be void of the faith in the one true God entirely. Now we know that the God of Israel is the one and only chancellor and ruler of the universe. However, he allows for us to choose and define paths and direction. And I believe that God believes in the goodness that is inherent within man to overcome the darkness that this world proliferates. Goodness within man is key to salvation. Without inherent goodness, man cannot find God because he will not be tuned to the frequency of God's voice. It's the goodness within man that allows God to be found. It's the goodness within man that allows God to be realized in your life. The mere fact that you have God in your life is because you have an inherent goodness. You have Yetzer, there's Yetzer Hara, Yetzer HaTov. You have a Yetzer HaTov. You have this inclination of good that is within you. That inclination of good finds itself seeking out God. And God knows and understands that there is this goodness within man. And that being said, you must know that some that seemingly lack this inherent goodness have in fact just rejected the deposit that they had from birth. Each of us have a deposit of goodness. And when you reject it, you refuse it and become reprobate. Many people in the world have rejected that goodness. And you can't talk to them for anything about God. If you mention God, it's regardless. I know there's a man that we've known he was on his deathbed. And he was a wicked man on earth. He's done some bad things, but he also did very good things for people. And quite honestly, I respected the man. For what he achieved and accomplished in life. But you bring up God to this man, and it was like you were, stabbing him in the neck. It was that bad, And he's on his deathbed, and my parents come to the man and say, we want to talk to you about God and whether or not you're saved. And he would have nothing to do with it. He wanted nothing to do with that. He had made his decision. I want nothing to do with this God, right? Well, that's a mind like that of Pharaoh. We see in the story of Pharaoh in Egypt that God allowed for Pharaoh to tap his inherent good by providing an opportunity to release the children of Israel. He said, I'll give you the opportunity to release them. Let my people go, Moshe says. But rather than succumbing to that good nature, the goodness that should be inside of him, he embraced the opposite and in fact became reprobate in mind and character. And he pushed and pushed and pushed against the God of Israel to the point where even his first sons would die. And we're all provided the chance to choose. And some of us, like Pharaoh, lack the ability to have a second chance. The mere fact that you and I are here today is evidence that we have chosen wisely and desire to follow the good nature of God. A rabbi of late ministered that the Midrash relates that when God desired to create man, that truth argued. Truth, as if it was a person, argued that man should not be created because man is full of lies. And then kindness came out and said, he should be created, for he, man, is full of kindness. To this, truth might have replied, but that too is just another of man's lies. Yes, man does acts of kindness to his fellows, but not because he is full of kindness, only because he expects them to be kind to him in return. That's truth's response. In the beginning of this lesson by this late rabbi, it helps us to define that we have a difficult time finding the goodness and righteousness of man, even sometimes in ourselves. We spend a significant amount of time questioning the intentions of others and rejecting their intrinsic goodness out of the belief that man is incapable of performing truly righteous acts toward other men. The rabbi goes on to say, however, there is one act of kindness that proves truth wrong. The kindness done to the dead. This kindness and truth, as the Torah calls it, shows that man is capable of a truly altruistic deed, thereby attesting that all our acts of kindness, even those superficially tainted by selfish motives, are in essence true, deriving from an intrinsic desire to give ourselves to our fellows. When you don't have any reason to receive anything from somebody, they can do nothing for you. The guy's already gone. He can't add you to his will. So you can do a very special act for that person, whether it be paying for the funeral that he could not afford, or whether it be giving him a great eulogy or her a great eulogy that they did not expect, or whether it be donating into a foundation on their behalf and in their name. It means, and you yourself or an anonymous donor, that act cannot be repaid. Just recently, there's a gentleman that was an actor that died. His name's Paul Walker. He was the main actor in the Fast and Furious movies. There's 5 of those films out there, or 6 of them, I think. But this guy, no one would have known it until after he's passed on, but he was a phenomenal person. And he had many charities, and he gave to people around the world. And one time, there's a story my wife told me that he was in a jewelry store. And in this jewelry store, there was a woman and a man. And they were looking at a ring in the jewelry store for marriage. And she really loved this ring, and she said, I really love it. And she said, but we just can't afford this. And we really appreciate you showing it to us, but we can't afford it. And they put the ring back in the box, and this couple left. But before they left, I guess they had signed who they were, and they were visiting, and they were guests or something. But Paul Walker, this guy who passed away, went to the counter, and he bought that ring. And he said, send it to them anonymous, and tell them to come pick up the ring. It's paid for, it's theirs, and have a wonderful marriage. Well, no one ever knew that Paul Walker paid for that ring. Paul Walker just recently died, and the owner of the jewelry store felt that it was important that he call that girl and tell her that Paul Walker, the one who just passed, is the one who paid for your ring. Great deed. Now, he didn't require any kindness. He didn't require anything in return. That was true, innate kindness that he felt inside of himself that he would give to that couple so that they could start their life on a good note. Now, whether or not you say, wow, there's people in the world that say that's materialistic, that you would want that ring or that diamond. Well, bah humbug on those people, right? Because it's a beautiful thing, and the ring represents so much. And so that ring that he bought for them was very important in the representation of their future together. Paul Walker was able to put a building block down for that family, and he did it anonymously. A true act of kindness. A true act of kindness that many people don't want. My wife, I know we have birthday parties for the kids, and people buy gifts for our daughters, and we have to go back in time and think about, well, what did they buy for our daughters, so we can make sure that we match it for their daughter, right, or their son. We've got to match, how much was that? It was $25. Now I have to spend $25 on them, right? That's what people do. I mean, it's not about kindness. It's not about the widow's mite anymore. It's literally a one-for-one, a quid pro quo, a tit for tat. Nothing is true kindness. I gave that to you out of the abundance of my heart. I didn't give it to you to receive. This season is about giving out of the abundance. And when we say the abundance of what you have in excess, right? No one expects someone in great need to give out of abundance if they don't have abundance. But you are required to show kindness in the best way that you can show kindness. And everyone has a way to show kindness. Everyone has an opportunity to reveal kindness. The lessons of ancient Judaism, of Christianity, and modern Judaism all reflect this necessity to transmit to the world an altruistic nature that will bear the burden of bringing about healing to the sick, clothing the poor, housing the destitute, and feeding the hungry. In essence, we must possess a selfless concern for the welfare of others. You should genuinely be concerned for the welfare of others. At my office, there was a box early this year during Thanksgiving time, or a can that said, bring your canned foods and your boxes and stuff and fill it up for the needy people. And some people brought stuff in and put it in that box and brought stuff for the needy people, whoever felt compelled to do so. Now, no one knows who did it, right? There wasn't a sign-in list. I don't think, maybe there was. Diana probably knows if there was, but I don't think there was a sign-in list. But nobody knows who did that, right? So that was just something they felt good to do. And literally, you have no idea where that food is going to go, who's going to feed. You just know that you care that that food is going to feed some hungry child somewhere in the world, or adult, or family. Now there's a box out in the foyer there at the offices, and it says, please bring all your winter gear that's newly used or new that you want to donate for people that are in need. That's a great thing to do, and it's a kindness that no one's going to know. You're not going to get any benefit out of it. I mean, literally, no one is going to be able to say, that person gave me this, and then you won't feel like you need to repay that kindness. It's a true act of kindness. I remember I was joking around with somebody who's from the Middle East that works at the office, and I said, well, what are you going to bring, man? Are you going to bring and put it, when it was the canned foods, I said, you should bring some foods. He goes, oh, Michael, he's from Morocco. He says, I only have, real food, Michael. It will spoil, because he doesn't keep canned foods and stuff. And I said, so you can bring a lamb and tie it to the door, right? And the little lamb will be tied to the door there, and someone will get themselves a nice lamb for the holidays, And it was a joke, but think about it. I mean, what if he did do that? What if he decided all I have was this lamb, and I'm going to tie it to the door and give it to whoever you can give it to? I mean, that would be a true act of kindness, right? We don't know what people have to give, and we shouldn't expect people to give what we can give. But we know that everyone can give. Everyone can give something, somewhere, for someone. The opposite of selfish is not thinking about our welfare all the time. and the treasures that we build on earth for our own pleasure, but rather spending in a proportionate amount of time focusing on giving to those that are truly in need. The central thrust of this nature is predicated on a motivation to help others or the desire to want to do good without reward. The desire to want to do good without a reward. You don't need something in return. A pure altruistic nature is giving without regard to reward or the benefits of recognition. You don't need your name in lights. No one needs to know that you did this. I go to every year there's a big auction it's called Big Shots and Little Stars. It's a company that takes photographs of kids with cancer. And, they have this fashion show, and it's this big thing, and it's at the Q. And, I've been going there the past 3 years, and it's an auction. There's a live auction, and then there's the silent auction. Well, in the live auction, they're selling off, Learjet rides with the Cavs players, and they're auctioning off, a 25-course meal with the best chef in the United States and all this other stuff, right? And at this live auction, and there was this Porsche Cayenne, big vehicle they were auctioning. Everyone's raising their hands and their cards, and it's 10,000, yeah, thank you, 100,000, thank you for your $100,000. But they're getting their reward right there. I mean, every single time they go, bing, 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 that woman points at them, thank you for that $100,000 blah. The wife, you see the wife's face like, and you see the guy there like, I have 100,000 to give, that's the reward. But what if that guy didn't give that 100,000 there, and he decided that he's going to give it, not to receive the Porsche Cayenne, because literally we're there for Big Shots, Little Stars, for these little kids that walk on the stage with cancer and their hair is all fallen out and they look like they're on the door of death, and it's the saddest thing, and everyone's trying. And then just before, just as that's over with, you got some guy, bidding on a Porsche Cayenne that supposedly the money that he gives to that is going to go to this Kids for Cancer program. Well, why don't you give it without getting the Porsche Cayenne, without having the dinner? Don't take the 25-course meal. Donate the 25-course meal to the Haven of Rest. Oh, and by the way, give the money too. Because we don't do that in society. We give for something. I'll give you money, but I want something in return. I'll donate to this cause, but what am I going to get in return? I remember when we built our congregation, somebody came to us and said, he'll pay for the whole thing. He said, I'll pay for all of it. You won't have any debt. But I want my name on it in lights. The guy wanted to have his name out there, like the blank, blankety blank congregation of Bath, Ohio, right? The guy's name. And we're like, this is God's temple, man. This isn't yours. If you're going to donate it, you're going to donate it. But I'm not putting your name on the wall. We don't care who it gets donated. If it's out of the goodness of your heart, praise God. But otherwise, we can do without it. Well, literally, if you're not going to put my name on it, I'm not going to give you the money. Well, okay. You have a good one. We'll be all right. I mean, that's society today. That's what we can't be. We have to have an altruistic nature. Give out of the goodness of who we are, of who God made us. This is the requirement of our faith. However, it should not be viewed as an obligation or a duty regardless of its necessity. It is necessary to be good. But that necessity should not be viewed as an obligation. The moment you view it as an obligation is the moment that it loses its goodness and it becomes wicked. Because now you're doing it because you're obliged to do it, and that means that your heart isn't correct. To have an obligation towards something is not the same as doing something out of the goodness of your heart without need of recognition. In Matthew chapter 6, Yeshua provides us with a lesson on altruism. He describes the good, kind, loving, and unique nature of his people when he says to take heed that you do not alms before men, to be seen of them. I just gave you multiple examples of that, right? Take heed that you do not alms before men, that you would be seen of them. Otherwise, you have no reward of your Father which is in heaven, because you've already received your reward. What would he reward you on? My wife, last night, she went to a function with some ladies, and I have to tell the story because I felt it was hysterical. And she goes to this function, and they're having hors d'oeuvres or whatever, appetizers, and at the end of it, there's this one that was kind of talking to her, and it was kind of weird, and Tasha felt uncomfortable with this lady the whole time, but then at the end the bills were coming, and the lady goes, no, I'm taking the bill. And everyone's like, no, we can take our own bill. It's no big deal, right? And she goes, no, I'm taking the bill. And then she opens the bill, and she sees the value of the bill. And she goes, what? This isn't right. This is all it is? There's no way this is correct. And she makes this huge stink over a bill that she thinks should be 3 times the size that it is, throwing her wallet around. And I say to my wife, that's like the worst thing possible anyone can do. But what that is that's giving of alms in front of men. Showing what you can do, your capacity, showing who you are and making yourself known. Your reward is done there, right? The reality is everybody in the room with my wife felt like, that's weird, like, great, the bill's less. Why would you even mention anything, That's the bill, pay it and let's leave in case they made a mistake, I mean, it was just an awkward situation that totally is typified here in this verse. Do not your alms before men to be seen of them. Otherwise, you have no reward of your Father. Therefore, when thou do alms, do not sound a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory of men. When you give to people in this time, I don't care, no one else should care what you gave. That's good for you. I gave X amount to so-and-so and X amount. So what? That's great. You want us to pat you on the back? Do you want us to tell how great you are? Should we call the Beacon Journal and put a write-up in there? Right? So-and-so gave this much to this person. That's how bad it looks. It doesn't bode well for the faith. For your faith, people will see you as someone who isn't godly, but rather ungodly. The scriptures right here say that this is what the hypocrites do, so that they might have glory of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand's doing, that thine alms may be in secret, and thy Father which seen in secret himself shall reward thee openly. There's something beautiful about that. If you can give alms in secret without being known, imagine the goodness and kindness that resides inside of you. That's a truly kind person that requires nothing in return. That's also a very confident person, right? Somebody that doesn't require the praise of others. Somebody that's very secure in who they are. We want that security in who we are. We shouldn't desire or need or require the praise of other people. So here, it's interesting that if a man does alms in secret, he does them because he does not require a reward. But Yeshua states he'll receive a reward even though he did not require one. I mean, that's the right person to get a reward, right? The one who didn't expect it. The one who was least expecting the reward gets it. That's the right person to get the reward. The challenge is to act without desiring to receive a result. Verse 5 says, when thou pray, thou shalt not be as the hypocrites are, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they may be seen of men. And verily I say unto you that they have their reward. But thou, when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. But when you pray, use not vain repetitions as the heathen do, for they think that they shall be heard for their much speaking. Be not ye therefore like unto them, for your Father knoweth what things ye have need of before you even ask him. You literally do not have to ask. It's good that you do. But he knows. This is talking about people that are arrogant, that have a pride, that like to show off what they can do, what they've done, who they are, where they've been. We shouldn't be striving for those things. Some people that are most time type A type personalities that are aggressive and that are overachievers are like this. Right? Aggressive type A overachievers, they want to be seen, they want to be known and heard and yada, yada, yada. Well, the worst thing in the world is for them not to be seen or heard. The point here is that they should remember where their blessing comes from. Because without God giving them the blessing, they would not have been there. Once you lose your memory, you lose your blessing. Once you lose your memory, you lose your blessing. It has nothing to do with these people or individuals or the people that give. They're only able to give because God gave them. Not because they did anything themselves. And that's the confusion. The confusion is that you're not managing your assets, you're not managing your money, you're managing God's because he's the one that put it in your care. So none of it is yours. All of it is God's. When you start to think that way, it's easier to give that without being recognized. Because you're giving it on behalf of God. Therefore, God receives the glory. Well, I don't know who gave this to me. It must have been God. I've been in need for a long time. I don't know who gave this to me. It must have been God. Your name comes out and said, I gave that to you. Immediately, God loses the reward and you gain it. But what you had to give, you received from God. So why not give the giver the reward? Verse 16, it says, when you fast, be not as the hypocrites of sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces, that they may appear unto men to fast. That's to receive a reward, guys. Imagine, you're fasting, you're hungry, you're done, you're doing this. And everyone's like, what's the matter? Are you okay? Is everything okay? Oh, I'm fine. No, are you really fine? What's the matter? Because, all of us are priors. We pry. We have to know. Why is your face disfigured? Well, it's just nothing. No, really, tell me. Okay, come with me over here. Come with me over here. I'll tell you, but tell no one else, please, because I don't want them to know. Okay, what is it? I'm fasting. Literally, that's happened. Literally, that has happened more than 10 times, maybe 20. Why? Right here, literally, the Bible says not to do that. Oh, you are? Oh, you're probably so hungry. It's really taking a toll on me. It's really taking a toll. How long have you been fasting? Oh, it's only been 8 hours now, but... Unbelievable. You come in here, you have a smile, you're normal, no one knows. You go out to Oneg. Hey, you want to have something to eat? No, I'm fasting. What? You could have just said, I'm not hungry, but fine, you're fasting. So what are you fasting for? It's very personal. So why'd you bring it up? Do you really want to tell me? You know they really want to tell you, right? Every single time they want to tell you why. So they want you to keep prying. The great thing is I usually just go, oh, well, that's great. Good luck. We'll see you. Shabbat shalom. And I move on. Because that's the biblical thing. Keep it to yourself. That's what it says. It says, I say unto you, they have their reward. But thou, when thou fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that you appear not unto men to fast, but unto the Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret will reward you openly. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, where their thieves do break through and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Let's dissect this. Let's use the word, let's unpack that right there. Everybody thinks that's material things. Lay not up your treasures in heaven. What did we just get finished talking about? It said, do not give alms to get the reward of men. And then it says, do not fast to get the reward of men. The treasure they're getting is the praise of man. They're building up their treasures through you, giving them praise. Not building up treasures with God in secret. God, I gave this on your behalf. And bing, you just earned a treasure in heaven. God, I'm fasting. I don't want to tell anyone. Someone walks in the room immediately as you're praying. Hi, how are you? And no one knows a thing. Bing, you earned a treasure in heaven. That's not about working hard or less hard. Not building up your, there is a direct correlation between how hard someone works and how much they get in life. Period. That's an absolute fact. The harder you work, the more you get. Look at the immigrants. All of the immigrants that have come to this country. We wouldn't have New York City. We wouldn't have railroads. We wouldn't have electricity. We wouldn't have anything if these people did not put every waking hour into work. Were they building treasures on earth? No, they were working hard. Whether or not that's a treasure on earth or not, that doesn't matter. But let's not take this verse into the materialistic. Let's take it into the spiritual. When somebody gives out of their own volition, and they want the reward for it, they built their treasure on earth. They built their reward here. When somebody fasts for everyone else to see, they built their reward here. When somebody gives anonymously and no one else knows, they built their reward there. When somebody fasts and no one else can see it, and only God knows that it's happening, they built their reward there. It's basic. The challenge here in our lives is maintaining our zeal. so that we can actually live this way. Maintaining our zeal in the faith so that we can actually do that. Because everybody wants to get recognized sometime. Everyone. That's human nature. So how do we maintain it? How do we remain ablaze like the burning bush, burning with a desire and a passion for God alone and to keep His commandments, so that we may be a blessing to the world around us, so that we might be a blessing and we're only a conduit, merely a conduit. I'm not the blessing. I'm only the vessel, the conduit that the blessing flowed through. That's hard to recognize. You want to be the blessing. You want someone to say to you, you blessed me so much. You are a blessing to me. You are my blessing. No. You should fundamentally reject that. No way am I your blessing. God is your blessing. I'm only the conduit whereby God decided to bless you. That's altruistic. That's selflessness. It's hard because we want it. We want to be the blessing. I love to give. I love it. I mean, I'd rather probably give than everything I receive. I'd rather, if I could give something to someone rather than for myself at this stage in my life and at my age, for whatever reason, that feels good to me. I mean, I remember a time when I used to love to just blow money on myself and give to myself, all right? But it's kind of gone away. I feel good just giving to some other people. But I have to ignore that desire for myself and be a conduit. Every temple has been destroyed and must be rebuilt, even you. But you must begin to rebuild one brick at a time. And as you do, you find healing. And that healing and strength comes as a result of the kindnesses that you share with the world around you. Kindness can heal. It literally does. Literally, kindness heals people. A smile, a laugh. I mean, a doctor will even tell you. It'll change your life if you just smile and laugh. Literally, I met with a team of people at work, and I told them, I said, the atmosphere at this place is an absolute train wreck. I'm done. I go home at night, I'm upset, I'm mad. My wife wants to talk, I'm on the couch. I don't want to talk because I've been talking all day, and I've been irritated and fighting and arguing. And I said, I'm going to implement a new policy of kindness. You have to respect the person next to you, and you have to smile. And I said, and when people think that I'm upset when I'm walking through the halls, that's just my face. I'm not mad. I'm in a good mood. But when someone says, what's the matter with you? That puts me in a bad mood. I'm smiling. But I have to make a concerted effort, and I said that to the team. I said, look, guys, we have to make a concerted effort because we can change the atmosphere. We can change the atmosphere. The cloud could lift. Kindness changes everything. In today's parashah, it states, and the days drew near for Israel to die, and he called his son Joseph and said to him, do me a kindness and do me a truth. Please do not bury me in Egypt. I will lie with my fathers, and you shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place. And Jacob entreats Joseph, he says, carry me out of Egypt. So great is his urgency that he's not content with an agreement or a promise on Joseph's part, but he insists that his son take a solemn oath to fulfill this request. And his son actually has to go to Pharaoh. He has to go to Pharaoh and make a big deal of it. I made a solemn promise to my father that I'd take him out of Egypt. that I would do his dead body this kindness. One of the sages states that a Jew might find himself living a most ideal life in exile, in Galut, a life of material comfort and spiritual fulfillment, a life of Torah, mitzvot, and charitable works. You can find that in exile, because exile's not as hard. Irina lived in Israel for 8 years. It was very hard to live in Israel. We have very good friends that are Israeli, that lived in Israel their whole lives. They're Sabra. Very difficult to live in Israel, and they moved here. They moved to Akron, of all places. And they love it. When they hear a siren, the children say, "Mommy, should we run?" Because they think that they're going to be bombed. And they say, that's gone now. We're not going to die if we hear the siren? Oh, no, honey, it's just a tornado siren. Whew. I'll take God's natural disaster over a Syrian missile all day. The relief that is felt in exile is interesting. You can experience material comfort. You can even get spiritual fulfillment. We all live in exile now. We're not in Israel, but we get spiritual comfort here. Spiritual fulfillment. We get a life of Torah. We get a life of mitzvot and charitable works. We do all of that here in exile. But nevertheless, Galut can never be our true home. We constantly sense that this is not our place, constantly beseech God to carry us out of Egypt. Realizing our exile forces us to seek this burning bush, this passion within the wilderness that drives and produces our passions for God. The Baal Shem Tov states that man is a tree of the field. As it states in Deuteronomy 20:19, it says, "But the field has many types of trees." The Talmud compares the righteous Torah scholars to fruit trees, which bestow beauty, fragrance, and nourishment upon the world. And many of you know that even in the Brit Chadashah, I mentioned and referenced the Talmud here only because the Baal Shem Tov is about to share something else. But even in the Brit Chadashah, how are we compared? We're compared to fruit trees. Right? What are your fruits that you hold? You're just like a tree, and you're bearing many fruits. How do you share those fruits with the world around you? But the fruit trees also burn. They burn with the ecstasy of the Torah they study, and with the fervor of their prayer, with the warmth of their good deeds. But theirs is a fire that burns and burns out. Isn't that interesting? The warmth of your good deeds, your Torah study, that's a fire that burns out. Good deeds don't satiate you. They don't satisfy your spirit. Reading the Torah doesn't satisfy your spirit necessarily. But theirs is a fire that burns and burns out, a fire that is sated by the words of Torah and prayer and the fulfillment of the divine will. But the thorn bush burns with a fire that is never satisfied. The simple Jew, this is interesting. The more complex you make things, it's harder for you to become satisfied. You can't be sated the more complex you are. Right? It says here, the simple Jew is compared to a thorn bush who cannot fathom the depths of the Torah, meaning like, I don't understand any of that, right? I don't get it. Who can barely articulate his prayers, Baruch Adonai, whatever, right? Who has little understanding of the significance of a mitzvah, His is a thirst never quenched because he's always trying to learn. I can't quite get there. I can't quite make it. His heart burns with a yearning for God he can never hope to still, and with a love he can never hope to consummate. Imagine the time when you first came to God. You could not get enough. Man, you were wanting it and wanting it and wanting it. And those of you that came out of the church and came into Messianic Judaism, you couldn't get enough of the Messianic way. Give me more, give me more, give me more. And then sooner or later, the way takes over, and your spiritual walk loses out. And then your fire burns out because you feel like you've arrived. You feel like you know. You have the knowledge. Your passions are stilled. Well, how do we be the people in an ever-growing, ever-learning, ever-changing environment that are as a thorn bush and as the simple Jew? It's too late for me to be simple because I already know. It's too late for you to be simple. How do we get back into the state of mind where we're driving and driving and driving toward the goodness and mercies of the Father, and we're trying to learn more of Him so that we can be that fire, so that we can be that blaze? When Moses, the most perfect of men, beheld the heart of flame that smolders within the thorn bush, he was humbled by the sight of it. He said that I must turn aside to see this great sight. He said, I must move from where I am and strive to awaken in myself this insatiable fire of the simple Jew. Today, as you realize the season that you're moving into, because many of you have family that celebrate the holidays approaching, I will literally be in a Chinese restaurant having Hunan chicken and go to a movie theater, right, on Christmas Day. If not, go to work. But some of us will be, sitting at our relatives' homes. And we have to recognize who we are to be. You represent something greater than the trappings of the season. The kindness that resides inside of you has to exude from you. It has to be the fire and the passion of the God of Israel. And they have to see it. It's very easy for many people in the faith and even in Messianic Judaism to go to their families' holiday parties and talk to them as to why they should not be living the way they are. That's an absolute train wreck. You're a terrorist. You're entering into that holiday terrorizing their time rather than terrorize their what they believe is right. Make it even more right by spilling over your love and kindness to them. And then they'll ask you about what you do, and you'll be able to share. But don't share it in a way that, hey, by the way, I'm literally better than you. Because you have this pagan idol in the middle of your home. Geez, every time you put a gift beneath your tree, you bow to it. We can't do that. We can do it between us, right? Because we know. But going in and doing that is an absolute terror act. Show love, show kindness in this season. Remember kindness, and it will remember you when you need it the most. Today, Pray to God that he will set ablaze your spirit as he did the thorn bush with Moses. Find in your heart the desire to follow and keep the commands of God, to love your neighbor, pouring out kindness and truths upon them as you continue in this season of remembrance and charity. Give of yourself freely, share your blessings, and be the spark that ignites others to desire to know the God of Israel and his Mashiach Yeshua. And more importantly, when you spread this kindness, spread it as if you're spreading it to the dead, and you will receive no reward. Amen? It is our duty to praise the Master of all, to ascribe greatness to the author of creation. For he made us unlike the nations of the lands and has not placed us like the families of the earth. He's not made our portion like theirs and our lot like all their multitudes. We bend the knee and bow and acknowledge our thanks before the King of Kings, the Holy One, blessed be he. He stretches out heaven, establishes the foundations of earth, and the seat of his glory is in the heavens above, in the presence of his power, in the most exalted heights. He's our God, there's none other. True is our King, there is nothing beside him, as it is written in his Torah. And you shall know this day and take to your heart that the Lord, he is God, in the heavens above and on the earth below, there is none other.